Have you ever taken a bite of that soft, golden roll dusted with breadcrumbs, filled with sweet, buttery goodness, and wondered, why on earth is it called Spanish bread? It's not exactly Spanish, right? Yet, despite its familiar sweetness and uniquely Filipino character, it carries a name that points somewhere far away, to Spain. So, what's the story behind this beloved pastry's name? Let's uncover the history, influence, and evolution of what we now know as Filipino Spanish bread. Let's explore, right here, on History of Simple Things. To understand why Spanish bread carries its name, we have to travel back in time to the Spanish colonial era in the Philippines. For more than 300 years, from 1565 to 1898, Spain ruled over the islands, shaping much of the Philippines' culture, language, religion, and even its cuisine. During that long period, Filipinos adopted and adapted many Spanish customs, including the art of bread making. Before the Spaniards came, rice was the staple, and bread wasn't a part of the everyday Filipino diet. But when the Spanish friars and settlers introduced wheat flour and baking techniques, they also brought with them their love for pastries, rolls, and loaves. Things like pan de sal, which literally means bread of salt, pan de coco, and other breads that eventually took on a local twist. The introduction of bread led to a new culinary culture in the Philippines, one that mixed Spanish and native influences. Early Filipino bakers learned the European methods of kneading and fermenting dough, but since wheat didn't grow locally, they relied on imported flour. Over time, bread became not just food for the rich or the clergy, but something more accessible to everyone. Local bakers began experimenting with recipes that suited Filipino tastes, sweet, buttery, and filling. And that's where Spanish bread likely began to take form. Now, the bread itself doesn't directly originate from Spain. You won't find an identical version of it in Madrid or Barcelona. Instead, Spanish bread is more of a Filipino invention, inspired by Spanish-style pastries and the naming conventions of that time. You see, during the colonial period, labeling something as Spanish added a touch of prestige. It implied quality, class, and European sophistication. So, foods like Spanish sardines, Spanish rice, and Spanish bread were not necessarily from Spain, but were inspired by Spanish flavors, or simply carried the name as a sign of influence. It's a little like how French fries aren't actually from France. It's more about the style and the cultural association than the actual origin. Filipino-Spanish bread reflects that blend perfectly. It combines a European-style yeast dough with a distinctly Filipino sweetness and texture. The dough is soft and slightly chewy, enriched with milk and butter, and rolled into a log shape that's generously coated with breadcrumbs. Inside, the filling is usually made of butter, sugar, and breadcrumbs, a mixture that caramelizes slightly as it bakes, giving the bread its signature gooey sweetness. This filling isn't something you'd find in traditional Spanish pastries, but it's exactly the kind of adaptation that defines Filipino baking. Humble ingredients turned into something comfortingly indulgent. There's also an interesting theory that connects Spanish bread to Ensaymada and pan de coco, two other Filipino breads with colonial roots. Ensaymada originally came from the Spanish ensaymada, a coiled pastry from Mallorca made with lard. But over time, the Filipino version evolved, softer, sweeter, and topped with butter, sugar, and cheese. Similarly, pan de coco, meaning coconut bread, was another adaptation, featuring sweet coconut filling inside a fluffy roll. Spanish bread fits right in that family, European in structure but deeply Filipino in taste and identity. In fact, many Filipino bakers see Spanish bread as the everyday treat version of Ensaymada. It's less fancy, easier to make, and perfect for merienda, that mid-afternoon snack time Filipinos love. You can find it in every neighborhood bakery, often sold warm and fresh from the oven. And that smell, that sweet buttery aroma, it's something that instantly feels like home to many Filipinos. It's no wonder that even after generations, Spanish bread remains a nostalgic favorite. Another fun layer to the story lies in its symbolism. Spanish bread represents the Filipino ability to take something foreign and make it their own. It's not just about the bread, it's about identity and creativity. Filipinos took the Spanish influence, a product of colonization, and turned it into something comforting, affordable, and uniquely local. Over time, the name Spanish bread stayed not because it accurately describes its origin, but because it became part of Filipino culture itself. It's a reminder of the past, baked into something delicious and familiar. Today, Spanish bread has continued to evolve. Modern bakeries sometimes experiment with variations, adding uva filling, cheese, or even chocolate. Yet the classic version remains unbeatable. Soft, slightly dense bread with a buttery sweet filling and that crunchy breadcrumb coating. It's the kind of bread that pairs perfectly with coffee in the morning or with a cup of hot chocolate during rainy afternoons. For overseas Filipinos, Spanish bread often serves as a nostalgic link to home. One bite can instantly transport you back to the corner bakery of your childhood. So, why is it called Spanish bread? The simplest answer is that it carries the legacy of Spanish influence on Filipino culture. But beyond that, the name reflects how the Philippines has absorbed, reinterpreted, and made something entirely its own. It's a story of adaptation, of turning a colonial trace into a cultural treasure. Every roll of Spanish bread tells that story, from its European-inspired form to its Filipino sweetness. Thank you for watching. If you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. If you enjoyed this video, please check out our other bingeable channels. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories woven through the smallest details.